So we've always operated under the assumption that we create an experience for a desktop computer, and then we degrade the experience as the user decides to use a smaller screen. And I think we have to stop that, because what we're in fact doing is we're treating people who are walking around with a phone or with a watch or some sort of other wearable device as second-class citizens, right? We all know the frustration of you go to a store and you know there's some sort of product and you want to learn a bit more about it. You saw it on your computer, and so you go into the store, you pull up the website, and then you've got like some sort of half-baked version of that site, and there's half the information is there. And you're like, why can't you give me that experience right here and now? Well, I actually have my wallet ready to spend money. I mean, that's crazy. It's just a lost opportunity. So we can't do that anymore. We have to. I think a better approach is to think about, okay, let's assume the person is maybe not sitting in front of a large screen. Let's assume they're in a smaller or a mobile device, and then perhaps change that experience as the condition whereby they have a larger screen. Give them, rearrange the layout, make it more appropriate, take advantage of that additional real estate if it's there, but don't diminish the experience or remove content just because they're on a smaller screen. Just make sure by default the content is designed to be consumed on a small screen quite easily. Right? We have to start thinking about that. So that approach is called mobile first. And hey, I'm not sure I entirely agree with the whole mobile first approach, but I think it's useful in that it challenges the way we've traditionally thought about designing for the screen. So what are we going to do today? We're going to go through a series of different breakpoints. We're going to take a single piece of content. We're going to formulate that visibly so that it's suitable for the small screen. And then we're going to progressively enhance that by setting media query breakpoints so that the larger screens get a more suitable experience that take advantage of that additional real estate. And then we're also going to talk about, well, how might I adapt to not only the screen size, but maybe whether or not that screen is held horizontally or vertically, right? Because that is a different context. And maybe we should start thinking about the watch. Something as small as something you would wear on your wrist. So we'll do a very experimental kind of kick at the can as to, well, imagine there's a browser on my watch. And in fact, I pulled up the Moto G, not because it's the only watch, there's all kinds of them on the market, but you can actually put a browser, a Chrome-based browser, on that watch. So that's just the start. Right? So there is a situation possibly where someone could want to access some amount of your content in some way on a watch, right? As crazy as that sounds, right? Cool. So what we'll do is we'll do all this work locally, and then we're going to, at the end of the class, we'll tidy this up. We'll throw it up on a server. And no, does anyone have a smartwatch? I've never met one with a. I have met people with a smartwatch, but certainly not one that browses. Does anyone have a smartwatch? No, I don't. I'm giving it some thought though. The only thing I find a bit crazy with a watch is the fact that it depends on you having the phone for all the connectivity, which is, I guess I don't always have my phone on me. Like sometimes I might be around the house and I leave it charging and I want it to watch, right? I don't know. I find that a bit. I'd almost want the watch to have its own kind of connectivity, notwithstanding the phone. But I do think there's something interesting. I think culturally, I don't think, like, my kids don't wear watches. They don't know why would someone wear a watch? That's weird. They don't think that. When I grew up, they were cool. Watches were cool. And you could get watches you could play Pac-Man on them, and you could do all kinds of crazy things. And the calculator watches are cool. But perhaps they'll come back in a format that we can't yet appreciate. All right. So let's have some fun with these media queries. We're going to do some rather experimental and probably some things you haven't thought of trying in the dev tools as well to try and emulate and capture these situations. So by the end of the class, you should be more competent with media queries. You should understand some of the possibilities that they might afford you, and hopefully it kind of triggers your imagination, because there there are all kinds of different ways we can use this. It's pretty cool. So download mq.zip. Pull that stuff down. Pull that down into your weekly. Now we're jumping ahead. I realize that don't panic because today is not week module 12. We're actually I'm jumping ahead because we were going to do forms today, but there's a couple of changes that are going on with some form elements that I want to capture. So I'm going to circle back next week to forms. I'm jumping ahead to the mobile lesson, which is 12. So next week we'll go back to module 11, which is fine. So download that here. I'm now using the terminal to zip up my folder. So hopefully we shouldn't have those crazy hidden system files in there if you're on a Windows machine. So please extract this. Windows users, Mac users, you can just double click it. You should be good to go. It should create a folder called MQ for media queries. That's cool. And as soon as you do that, throw the zip in the trash if you would, so that you're not tempted to open that up. And inside here, do I get a DS? Oh, okay. Fine. Yeah, I don't have any. That's great. So you should have a folder called MQ with an index template, a JS folder, and a CSS folder. So that should be all we have. So let's open up our code editor here. Add the project folder, documents, MQ, fire up index. Is that big enough at the back? Is it good? Big enough? Your eyes aren't like mine, eh? I need my reading glasses now. So let's turn on the soft wrap. Here we go. So that's what we should be looking at there. Let's fire this up open. We'll use Chrome to start with. We're going to look at some of the dev tools in Chrome, but we'll also take a look at some of the other browsers and look at their dev tools and see what they can afford us in terms of some of this work. They've all got neat little kind of utilities and things like that that are pretty neat. So let's open up our template. Cool. So what we should have here is a simple page. It says media queries. It's got some headings. It has some images from placehold.it for templating, for prototyping, wireframing. So these are set to width 100% so that we have a very basic level of responsiveness from the image, which is fine for our purposes. Of course, at that size, you probably would want to swap out for a larger, obviously a higher resolution image, maybe using the picture element like we've done before, right? That would be cool. So that's cool. That's about it. We'll take a look at what we have to work with. So we have a plain old div ID container in the body. Inside that we have a header, a main. The main has 3 sections, each with a subhead and some paragraph content, and the images with width equal 100% for that basic responsiveness. Then a footer with a small element, and that's it. That's all we have. So no tricks with that, right? But still, just to be sure, always just in case, just in case I'm trying to trick you. Right? No gotchas. Make sure that you are in good shape. Whoa. Written in capital. Written in what? That's weird. So you'll get a few failures on the image element. You'll get a failure on this one here, which is a non-standard tag. So that's okay, because this is something specifically for IE that we know that that's a problem. And no, this is just written in lorem ipsum, so we can ignore that. So we're in pretty good shape for what we're doing. Cool. All right. No structural problem with our code. So first things first, we want to add the viewport meta tag. So we need to always now, this with a mobile first approach, this would be just something as part of your normal boilerplate. When you start up an HTML template, you just add it in there, right? So the meta tag is what we use, and we use the name is equal to viewport, and the content of viewport will be width equal device dash width, comma, initial dash scale equal 1 or 1.0. And I'm using XML style tag endings, so if you don't want to do that, that's cool. And this has to be exactly this. You can't put caps in there or anything like that. It's got to be, you got to have this just so, or it's just not going to work for you. So now we know that any kind of device, any kind of screen we're using is going to be honest about the width of that window or that device. Not device width, but the width in terms of reporting in CSS pixels. Otherwise, it will just say, well, I'm a television. I'm a 4K desktop. I've got tons of pixels, right? So you know, that's cool that your device can cram 8,000 pixels into a millimeter. That's awesome, but we're not interested in that. We're interested in CSS pixels, right? So be honest about how wide, from CSS perspective and PX, we have to work with. That's good. You'll find that doing that doesn't really do anything to the desktop, because the desktop's already being honest about its device width. So it's reporting the right way. Cool. Step 2, reset or normalize. So what we'll do is we'll punch all these styles right into, I like to do when I'm working on a template for a UI and I'm wireframing it out this way, I like to just have my style sheet right there and my markup just below. You might want to separate it out right away. I don't care, whatever you want to do, but we'll separate it out later. So I'll add import, and I'll do this at the top here just before the step 2. And I fired up normalize and today and realized, I was just grabbing a fresh copy. I was like, whoa, they're at version 6. That's pretty cool. So they're continuing to work with the normalize technology. So that's pretty neat. So you can rely on that, I think, for the time being as a great way to kind of make sure that your layout renders consistently enough across different browsers and platforms. So as soon as you do that, make sure that is working. When you refresh the page, you should see that we get sans serif. Oh, or maybe they don't do sans serif anymore. Interesting. Maybe they changed that. Yeah. Version 5 did sans serif. Maybe they don't. Maybe there's less opinionated defaults. Font style at time. All. Wait and hear it. Good. Font size. Interesting. So maybe they no longer set the that to a sans serif font. That's good. That's all right. Having less opinionated defaults is not necessarily a bad thing. That's new to me. That's cool. So step 2. Step 3. Now we want to apply some basic layout styles. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to say, with a mobile first approach, right, where we have a small screen, if I have a number of, let's say, content blocks, let's say we're going to assume most commonly that the user is going to see things in a single column view, single column layout. Their navigation will be at the top. It might be there in a small list. It might be there with there might be a hamburger button that has a slide out panel or something that appears and disappears for the navigation. But generally speaking, you'll have your branding as a block, and then directly below that will be some headings and some content in a single column layout. So let's build that out by default, right out of the box. And just say that's the way it should be. So let's not build it for the desktop and degrade the experience. Let's make it a great single column experience now. And then set some breakpoints that enhance that or rearrange that. I don't like the word enhance because let's just make it different for our bigger screen. So here's what we will do for the basic layout size. First of all, we'll apply the body. And I'll change the font because I want to make sure that let's change the font so we're so we can see some more visible changes. We'll set the font family, and we'll just do we'll do a sans serif. We'll also set the background color. Now, background dash color. A light gray for the body. We'll set our font dash size, and we'll set it at 100% because I may change that based on some of the experiences, but at least I have a kind of a one point where I can crank that up or down. If I'm using elastic-based layout where I'm sizing things based on ems, right, then it's going to refer to that root sizing for the font. We'll also open up the line height, line dash height, and we'll say it is 1.5, and that's just a factor. Save that. Make sure that we've got ping back there, so everything's good. We are starting to see some styles apply on the page for a single layout. And if you want, you can bring this down to a kind of a single layout situation, see what that might look like. Okay, so now next, let's take a look at the main element, I'll get rid of that. Don't need to normalize. The main element, so that will that contains the 1, 2, 3 sections below. So let's style the main element as a container for those sections. And we'll set the width of the main to 80%. We'll let the header and the footer kind of span the width of and we'll control the middle differently than the header and footer. So we'll let them kind of apply sit like a masthead across the full width of the page at the top and bottom, and we'll have the column in the middle. So we'll set the width to 80%. I'll auto center the main element. So 0 for the top and bottom margins, and we'll set automatic for the left and right, auto centering that thing. We'll add some padding. So top and bottom, I'll do 1 EM, and the left and right padding will be 5%. And I'll set the background to a slightly lighter gray. And again, really, I'm just wireframing. I'm not really doing anything So once you do that, you should be able to see then, there's the header, there's your footer, and you should see a lighter gray box surrounding these elements in there. Okay. Cool. Now let's deal with the fact that what I'd like to have a white background in behind my text, right? But we want to also target that for, there's content in the header, the section, and the footer. So we'll say header, comma, section, comma, footer. And the background will be white. We'll set some padding as well to give a little bit of breathing space around the content. We'll say 1 EM on the top and bottom of each of these things, and 5% to the left and right. And we'll set a margin on the bottom of each of these things to 1 font size. Now it's quite clear where all our bits and pieces are. So we can see where our footer is, our header, our div ID content, or our main element, each of our sections as well. So all those boxes are now very, very clearly laid out in a kind of a wireframe type way. So that's good. That's all good. I'll change the H2s. And I'll set them to text transform uppercase. And then we have a decent wireframe with which to work. So whether or not no matter what size you're at, this will be our basic experience. For the page, right? And so what? If they're on a bigger screen, and that's their experience, that's okay, right? Not ideal though, because once you get out into here, even though I've adjusted the line height, now the measure of these lines is a little long for tracking. So that's not great. But certainly, if we consider that most people are going to hit this page up at a size somewhere like that, this is an appropriate layout. So I think that assumption now is, well, that's where the mobile first assumption would take you. So that's perfect. So that is step 3. So step 4. Where's my step 4? Right now, this is where we're going to start building out those breakpoints. And these breakpoints here that we've got are, again, these are, you could look up charts and see what devices report in at what CSS pixel widths, and you could create a very detailed kind of matrix in terms of which devices kind of, where they're at. You can, in terms of their pixel density, and they're reporting it in CSS pixels. You could do that. You could try and figure out, based on your user share, who has most, are most people on an iPhone 5 or an iPhone 6, or most people on some sort of Android or a Samsung phone, or what about our tablet, user share and all these kind of things. You could do that, but I think that's a very painful way to do things. I think it's kind of fraught with complexity. I think it's going to get ever more complex. That landscape is going to be nuts. And I think that kind of brings us back to the early days of web, where we actually tried to use JavaScript to sniff out what browser the user was using, and that was fraught with all kinds of challenges, because sometimes browsers just lied. They just said they were something else, and then you We had all kinds of fun. So I think that's a slippery slope, in my opinion. You can differ on that opinion, and that's totally cool. But I think it's better to think about your content first, right? Because think of the nature of your content. At what width does it make sense to go from one column to two, based on the measure of your written text? So think about it, I think, from a graphic design perspective, rather than from a device perspective. I think those decisions will become clearer in terms of at what point do we set, how many CSS pixels do we make those changes to the layout? And how many of them are there, right? Do we need to go to from a 3-column layout to a 4-column layout? Do we really need to do that? So think about the nature of your content first, and I think that will become clearer. There are some kind of emerging kind of trends whereby people will say, well, generally speaking, this is a phone held vertically, and then above 320 or above 480 is kind of where you're in the tablet space, or a phone held horizontally. Generally speaking, 768 and above, you're into a netbook or a notebook. 960 and up, you're definitely into a desktop, and above a certain, maybe you're into a television. I don't know, but I think you could argue on and on about this forever, and I think it will just get more complicated. So let's talk about some kind of basic breakpoints here. I draw a lot of inspiration, I think, from Chris Coyer. I think CSS Tricks. He's got a very good curated collection of articles and tips, and he and the authors who contribute to that site are very, very well versed in these things, UI and those developments, and I think they give a very balanced kind of let's keep it simple kind of approach. Let's not get too bogged down in the nuts and bolts. So what does that look like here in terms of our breakpoint? So for a let's say we're going to say leave everything as it is, but once we hit 320, we're going to do something different. Okay, we're going to say we've got enough real estate to do something interesting with the user interface. So how this works is we would set the @media rule, and we would set only screen. And there might be a day when I maybe don't need to mention this, but I think maybe for at least the next couple of years, we have to think about this crazy thing here. So why I would put only there is because that's a relatively new addition to CSS media queries, whereby what we're saying is only apply this if it's a screen. But older browsers that kind of sort of support the media queries but do it in a broken way, they will listen to this and they will try to apply your breakpoint and your styles, but they won't get it right. If you put only here, what the thinking is that a user agent or a browser that sort of supports media queries but in a broken way won't understand only and will ignore it. So if you see that, what they're saying is, let's make sure this is a media query but only for capable browsers or user agents that can actually do it well. So you can do @media screen, but this is just a kind of an additional fail-safe to cut out things like IE 6, 7, and 8, which won't provide don't provide great support with media queries. So @media only screen, and so what we're saying, it must be a screen, and then in brackets we say min-width is 320 px. And we open up the brace and close the brace. So within this context, make sure you're tabbed in, one tab stop here. Then we apply the rules. So if you recall, inside there, then let's say, okay, let's change the H1. Just to see that it's working, we'll change the H1 to color yellow. So just some sort of visual feedback that this breakpoint is indeed working. So you can see that that should be snapping over. Just like so. Now we can use the dev tools if we want to. We can inspect this page, and then we can get, if you head over here, the little button up here, there's something called a device toolbar. We can click that, and you can just simply leave it at responsive. And that's kind of cool because what it does is it reports in the height and width, and also any kind of text zoom situation, right? And you can see then right at 320, it does indeed snap over, right? So that's pretty cool, right? So the other thing that's important too is inside the in the head section here, we also set our initial scale to 1.0. So if there was any text zooming that was applied by the device, if someone was doing any kind of pinch and zooming, or sometimes when you rotate a device from a landscape to portrait, it affects the text zoom on some machines. We just zero that right out. You can zoom the text up a bit if you want. And if I should, no, it doesn't set it back to 100. You have to do it manually. Cool. So let's head back here. That's good. So breakpoint 320 now. The interesting thing about setting the min width here, we also used to have something called min device dash width. So this was a little different. What we're saying here with device width, we're saying, is the device physically 320 or better? Right? That would, in fact, if I did that, there's some problems with doing that. So if I'm going to X out of here, I guess I have to refresh it. So now what happens is the device is much bigger than 320 pixels. It's a desktop, right? So now if I wanted to, because remember, having a responsive layout is not just about someone using a different device. Sometimes it's about using a very big device, but they've got all kinds of things on their desktop at once. So they may have, so the fact is I'm saying, I'm referring to the device itself rather than the pixels on the window object. So what it sounds like to me is this is becoming deprecated. So it looks like we're getting rid of this in favor of this, which I think is good. I think it simplifies, because I think that muddied the waters a little bit. So I much prefer the simplicity of just saying min width, and now what we're just saying is the viewport, basically, right? And I think that's more important. So there's the difference between min width and min device width.
Why do you have to put only screen?
Well, I could do this, right? I could just say media screen. So I'm looking at a number of conditions, right? So it must be a screen as opposed to print, or being read audibly, or being displayed on say a braille device. So that's cool. So it has to be a screen, and the min width has to be 320 pixels for the viewport or better. Only what happens is you've got a number of really dusty old browsers. They really try their best to do this, and the problem is the implementation is incomplete or broken. So then you get sometimes an unusable experience. Like you can't use it. It's broken. So the only keyword was a much later addition to the specification. So only really modern browsers that can really understand, like that have media queries implemented fully, only they had support for the only keyword. So it just dropped off the ones that didn't. It just couldn't quite do it properly. We don't want to get into that. If you're trying to get into, if you're trying to get old decrepit browsers to do this kind of thing, you're going to be into some CSS trickery and/or some JavaScript support anyway. So I think I think it's a good approach for now. But I'd like to see a day when I can just do that. As always, we live in transitional times. So there you go. That's cool. Step 4B. So what about a media query breakpoint? Now, there may be other things that I want to do between 320 and 480 for the layout. Maybe I want to size the text up a little bit larger at that point. Maybe, so in that case, what I would do here is I hit the body element up here, and I'd say font size, and maybe it's 120% instead of 100%, right? So I can add all kinds of things that might be appropriate for that slightly larger format. Right? Because maybe as I get wider, I still want to maintain that very narrow, that very short measure on my line. So I can size up the font. But in a smaller screen, I need to get a certain amount of content in there, so I got to size down the text a little bit. Not too much, because then it won't be readable. Particularly if we get into a wearable like a watch. Now you've got a real situation with your font sizing where you really have to be careful about that, right? Just because of the physicality of it. So that's cool. So let's go ahead and hit. So now we're saying, here's the experience. If we pass 320, here's some things I want to change to make it more appropriate. Now we'll set another breakpoint at 480, and we'll do the same thing with the only situation. So we say media only screen, and we're also going to say min dash width, and we're going to say 480 px. Open that up a bit, and what I'll do is we'll set the body. Maybe we'll open the body text up a little bit larger again. Font dash size, and maybe 140%. So size up the text, and maybe I also we'll change the H1 just as another visual indicator, and I'll change it to color orange, just so I've got a visual cue. Things are happening. So we should have breakpoint, first one at 320, next one at 480. And I can see now I've got, even at much larger sizes now, I have by sizing that text up, I have a much, so when I say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, say 9 to 10 words per line, where we're looking at a comfortable measure for line length being somewhere in, I've heard 9 to 12. I don't know, maybe a graphic designer can correct me on that kind of rule of thumb, but at least our measure is now more comfortable. That's great. Cool. So if you've got that, it's 12:04, so I do owe you a break. So if you've got that far, you've got everything working. If not, flag me down. I'll give you a hand. We'll take a look at your code, see what's going on. We'll give you a break, come back, and we're going to start looking at the 2-column layout to the 3-column layout, and then capturing orientation and some other, and then get into things like wearables. Cool. I'll put this thing on pause. Like that. It's cool. All right, so let's get on with the 2-column situation. So let's bolt in another progressive enhancement here, whereby at 768 we bust up or snap up to a 2-column layout of sorts. So those where we have those 3 sections sitting, let's have maybe 2 of them side by each and one of them full width, right? Maybe with a hero image or a more important, maybe the first section or something like that. So let's go again at media. We'll use the, whoops, that's weird. Media. You'll say min dash width 768 px. We'll change the H1 color to red just to make sure that this is working. Yep, there's our breakpoint. Snaps over. Yeah, and I like these. How these kind of coach you through some of these more typical breakpoints. I think that's, in the absence of any kind of other coaching. So we start with the mobile small, mobile medium, mobile large at 425, tablet at 768, laptop at 1024, and then laptop large at 1440. I mean, at least there's something for you to go on if you want to talk in generalities, and I think that's really helpful. So I think you could go a lot further wrong than using some of the suggested breakpoints in the dev tools. And I don't know, maybe the other dev tools have similar things, suggestions. I don't know. We'll fire up a copy of IE. Hit F12. And let's see where they tuck these things away here. Emulation. Windows Phone. There you go. Interesting. Okay, so we can go orange. Oh, this is in landscape. So you have to change it to portrait. There we go. And then you just jump through these things here. That's cool. I don't know. I guess you can't change them manually. Doesn't seem to be snapping over to. This is just. It's all Windows Phone, I guess. IE 11 on Windows Phone. UI responsiveness. Let's try it here. Oh. Interesting. No idea what that is. Oh, okay. It's going to track how it responds to different sizes. Let's fire up Firefox. Inspect the element. Let's go and see where our mobile devices. Where did they tuck those away? Debugger, style editor, performance, memory. Huh. Dock to the side. Yeah, if they've tucked them away, they've tucked them away in a pretty hard to find spot. I can't find it on this particular edition of Firefox. Interesting.
We'll do some more digging in that. See if I can. They might be buried somewhere in here. I'll do some more digging. It'd be a shame if you had to extend this with some sort of extension. I like to see this stuff right out of the box. Anyway, but I digress. So that's cool. What else are we going to do here? We want to make a two-column layout. So let's deal with the section elements. So the section elements, now we're going to, selector. Our section element, we're going to set them to a width of 35%. So we'll use floats and clears to do this basic column layout. So set them to width 35%. We'll set them to float left. And we'll set the margin on the left to 10% to give them a bit of a gutter between those two elements, right? So save that. And bring that up. Give myself a bit more room here. So sure enough, this thing's floating left. They're all floating left, but we're going to need to we want to put the two of them side by each here. So let's go ahead and finish this off. Our footer, first of all, let's clear our footer. And I'll just put clear both. If you could put clear left because we're floating left. I just hedge my bet, put clear both. And then I know if I'm floating things right or left, it's going to be handled for me. Reflog the page. And there, our footer is now clear to the bottom. Unfortunately, you can't see. Oh, well, maybe if I do this. Oh, yeah, I can just use this as it were. Too bad you can't see where my finger's hitting the screen. So that's fine. And however, I don't need a margin left on the first one. If I'm going to sit two of these side by each here, I don't need the first section to have a margin left. I just need the second one. I also don't need the third one because the third one I'm going to have full width. So what I'll do here is I'll say, here's what I can do. So we'll say, okay, let's say section, our section first child. So the first section, we set the margin dash left to 0. No classes, no IDs required on our sections, right? First child. So it's the section element. It is a little bit weird. You would think, okay, so let's look inside the section for the first child. It's the section that is a first child.
So basically like first of type?
Yes. Yeah, I've always struggled with that a little bit, the whole child thing. Yeah, that's the way this...
The child doesn't go into the other and looking for something.
No. So what might make more sense is if I do this. Make a contextual selector, and so then it says main, the first child of main that is a section. It probably makes more sense, I think, and really it's probably smarter to do this kind of thing as well, in case because you could have sections in the footer or the header as well, so you should probably do it. But yeah, I agree with that. I find that a little bit. I've had a tough time wrapping my head around that or why they did that. But I like first of type or nth child. Yeah. Or nth of type. I don't know. I find that maybe a bit more intuitive. But I'll show you this approach anyway. So if I do that, of course, then at that breakpoint, so now we don't have any margin left on, I guess I have to take this off to show you. I don't have any margin left here. Okay, just the padding, right? That's just the padding on the main element. Notice that the main element is now collapsed to height 0, right? Now what I could do, now what I want to do is put this one full width across here, right? Because I've got 3 sections. So let's go in here and add, we'll say main section, and we'll say last child. And we'll say, in this case, the width, we'll set it to 90%. Because remember, we still have a margin, well, 90%. Leave that for there. And then we'll set our margin left to 0. So we don't need if that one's sitting full width in terms of the section, it also doesn't need a margin left. Just the second one, essentially. Yep.
So what's the difference between first cell and first of 5 or end of 5 1?
I guess it's shorter to write, less typing. I don't see any functional difference between those 2 selectors, other than maybe you don't want to do a lot of typing if it's kind of more of a kind of a quick and simple. But in the case where you're starting to speak to, maybe in the context where you have a number of elements and you're speaking to specific units, or you're doing it programmatically, so you're saying nth of type 3n, so you might be saying every third of type, where you might want to do some more programming, a little bit more specific and programmatic and repeating kind of scenarios where you're grabbing in formula. So that's where I think this is a very basic. You can't extend this with anything else. That's all I think.
Maybe if there is like an image in the element, but like this one's in, and it wouldn't be the first child with it anymore because it'd be image before it, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So this is okay. That's cool. But maybe I want to put, maybe this is a bit weird because maybe this is like the most important article. I want up the top, and then maybe the subsequent second articles I want kind of below that big one, which would maybe be more intuitive. So let's see if we can swap those around. So let's say the main section, first child, that's cool, would have, and then the main section, so the first child would be marked with 90% in this case. And this is where I might need to target the second element in the set. So this is where I might have to say, instead of last child, I have to put, it's actually the second one where I don't want a left margin. So this is where I'd have to say main section nth of type sec2, number 2. And this would just be, I don't need the width anymore. I'll leave that as 35. Let's see if that gets where we want here. So that means, so there's our heading, and there's our 2 articles. Okay, so I'll bring the code back up again. So there's no reason why I couldn't just say main section first of type, or first of type. It's a bit weird. So we've got kind of a sort of a 2-column layout. Now, let's come back. There's a couple of issues we want to. Where are we at? Was this step 4C? So I need 4D. Where's my 4D? 4D. media clear. Oh yeah. So then we'll circle back to the. Or do I want to circle back to? Oh. Okay, yeah. Let's deal with the collapsed main element right now. So this is like, so down here you can see the main element here. This is it's still got its padding, right? And on the top of 1 EM, and the left and right, I think we set the padding to 10% or 5% or something like that on the main. So it's still there, but it's collapsed. The content area of this is collapsed to 0. That's why it's like that, right? So because all of its children are floated. So there's a couple of things we could do to clear this out. One of those things is setting a float to clear a float. And that may not be terribly intuitive, but it's the simplest way. If a parent, all its children are floated, left or right, you could set also float left or right on that parent, and it will then shrink wrap and auto size height to encapsulate its children. We could do that, but there'll be some issues with that. So let's go ahead. We'll do that anyway. So let's go into the, in this situation, we'll add after the H1, I'll add a main element. We'll target just the main in this section. And we'll say, okay, let's put a little, set a float to clear a float. So then we'll just say float left, just like all the child section elements on the main. Seems like a simple enough solution. Here's where the problem comes in. So we do that, reload the page, and it's float left, all right. It shrink wraps to encapsulate its container, right? So it goes, but we lost that auto centering. That was so cool, right? There's the auto centering, but as soon as we flip to that breakpoint, it jams up against the left side of the page. Not good. How can I do that? Well, let's not do that then. We'll comment this out, control right leading slash. What we could do instead is we could add a clearfix hack. To maintain auto centering. So a clearfix hack, and this is great. Well, it's good and it's kind of bad. So here we can see down here at the bottom of the style, somewhere around about line 88, you'll see there's a comment about the clearfix hack here. And if you follow this link to CSS Tricks, you'll see what Chris Koye has to say about the hack. So for IE8 and up, we can simply do something very simple, like set an empty piece of content displayed as a table. Set an empty piece of content element after the element itself, display it as a table, and clear both. So create an element after the main, set it to display as a table, should be width 100%, and clear both. So that would kind of force the issue. It's dirty, it's nasty, copy it and paste it. Okay, there's all kinds of clearfix hacks. Now, of course, I don't want, what I'm going to change is .group. I'll change this to clearfix, so it's a little clearer for our content here. Or you can just type that. I don't like this. It's a hack. It is a hack. It's a kludge. You know, what's the solution to this? The solution to this is to stop using floats and clears for layout. Right? It's to use something like Flexbox or CSS Grid.
Why do we even need the clearfix?
We need the clearfix. So if I get rid of I couldn't use the float left on the main because it jammed everything up against the left side of the page. Sorry?
Why wouldn't we use it on the main?
Why couldn't we just apply this on the main?
Why would we say float left on the main?
Why wouldn't we?
Why would we?
Because it allows the main to encapsulate its children.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right? Because it collapsed to height 0. So it did in fact allow it to encapsulate the children, but the cost to that was float left, or your side, we lost the auto centering because it just floated left. So I won some and I lost some, right? Which is, I was like, ah. So, so rather building out a class for clearfix, I can reuse this. Doing it this way means I can add .clearfix to any parent element with floated children, and they'll clear without that problem, right? So this allows me to create a little bit of reusable CSS. So now I have to go down to the main element here, and I actually have to add a class equal clearfix. I show you this because this is the current way of doing things in a lot of ways, like Bootstrap version. I can't remember what version 3. It's 3.x, whatever Bootstrap is. It uses clearfixes, floats, clears, and all that stuff to generate a grid-based layout for you based on classes that you apply to your markup. So this is current production code. Bootstrap version 4 allows us, if we wish to, you can continue with this or go over to a Flexbox model for that kind of thing. So you still need to kind of get an idea. You need to have a handle on floats and clears and how to wrangle these under control, because there are so many UIs that are still relying on this kind of stuff. I don't like it. I much prefer the Flexbox and CSS grid way of doing things, but we're not quite there today. Yeah, I might roll it out in production today, but I'd be a bit nervous about it. That's all. So we're getting awfully close though. But even as such, there's so much legacy CSS around. We're going to need to understand clearfixes, floats, clears, and clearfixes. So if I add the class clearfix there, that means after the main, there will be generated a character that is nothing, so it won't display like anything. It'll set it up to display as a table element. It'll be width 100%, and it will clear on both sides, forcing the footer, or forcing the element itself to auto-wrap its children. So if we try that, let's go back, reflog the page, and we can see suddenly, and magically, the light gray box wraps all of its children all the way down, and I have the auto-centering. So I have both. The cost to this was I had to add a class to my main element. I don't know.
It's not doing that.
It's not doing the... So a couple things to check. Check that you have this set to clearfix rather than the copied code that we nabbed from Kraskoye. So make sure this is inside the style sheet. Yep. Make sure that you add the class to the main element and it is the same value as that. Yeah, do a hard refresh on your page possibly. So if you hold this down or you right click on the, or is it control click? Yeah, that'll do a hard refresh. Still no go? So what's the result on your screen?
It's still
Oh, so you have to go into your code and remove the float left. Because it's doing the float left plus the clearfix. So you have to make sure that up here on the main, here you have to comment out the float left. Yeah. Otherwise, it'll leave the float in. It'll leave the float left in there happily. Yeah.
Okay, a question about the clearfix. Why? I guess I think I get the display label right, but why clear float?
Just to make it reusable in case you're floating right.
Yeah, but why clear?
Why?
Why do we clear it?
Why do you clear it? Because if it's the elements after the main and we clear it, we force the main element to render to at least that point in the page. Because now it's forcing there's an empty element with no content, clearing both left, so it clears the last child of that page, which is the last section, forcing the thing to go. It takes a bit of imagination, right? As with all these things, it's awfully abstract. It's a hack. It's a hack. It's a kludge. This is not great practice. It is what it is. It's when you put rubber to the road, sometimes you have to do kind of have to fudge things a little bit. The real answer is that floats and clears were never intended really as primary layout tools. It's what we've evolved to use them as such, but they weren't intended that way, so we've had to kind of limp them along with duct tape and bubble gum. So I appreciate that that's a bit abstract, but anyway, it is what it is. Eventually, we won't need clear fixes. We'll have grid, CSS grid, and flexbox, and we just say, lay these things out horizontally, spread them out and such, put a little space between them, and we're good to go. You know, if the window gets too narrow, set them as vertically rather than horizontally, and we're all done. So the future is very bright and much simpler, and it's really not far off now at all. So, but I'd be remiss if I didn't show you clear fixes now, though. I think you need to understand that. Cool. Okay, so that's cool. So we've got that. Now we've 4C. Now if we go to 4D, so now we want to head over to the 3-column layout. Okay, so the 3-column layout is going to say, let's say, we're going to say 960px. So we're going to say at media. And we're going to say only screen again. And we want to set the min-width to 960px. And let's rearrange this thing. So what we're going to do is a couple of things. That's not bad. Yeah, that's not too bad. Okay, so we do have a couple of things here. We're going to rearrange these sections so that they're all sitting in one row, all three of them together. We might have to adjust the font size to maintain our line measure as well. So we don't have our line. Maybe the font size will be too big now for the shorter line measure, but we'll see how that plays out. That's kind of a science thing, so or an art thing rather than a science. So let's set the H1. We'll set the color to red. Make sure that, if for no other reason, just to make sure this breakpoint is built properly. And remember, with this progressive approach, right? Every time I set a new breakpoint, those older styles are still in play. So the cascade is still in effect, because in this case, when I'm at 965 pixels wide, right? This is true, but also this is still true, right? So I'm adding more styles that are true all the time as I go bigger. So if I want to change something that was true in this situation, I have to override that style with the CSS cascade, right? Unless I put media only screen and min width 768 and max width is say 989, right? So I can set a breakpoint where there's a range in which those things are true. And this way, I'm going to benefit from some of that cascade by just setting the min breakpoints. Okay? So it's a little simpler. It's very much a mobile first kind of approach. So save that, head over here to the, and where do let me just see here. So I'll inspect this. Go to the responsive, yes. Red. Oh no, I think I did red as well, right? Didn't I do red in the other one? Yeah, I got red. Let's change this to something else. I don't know. Light blue, something. Okay, that's cool. Yes, okay, so that breakpoint is working at 960. So watch the responsive, 960, here we go. So at about that there, I'm going to break and move these all to a 3-column layout. All right. So a few things we're going to have to do. One, we're going to have to control the section elements. So we'll set main section. You can't just put section there. If I just put section there, this prior one here will trump it because of specificity, right? Because this is still in play. So I actually have to make the selector as specific as this one and override those rules. Because the only reason it's overriding is it's because it's later in the CSS order. That's the only reason. So our main section in this case, we're going to set the width, instead of 35, we'll set it to 20%. 20%. And what else do I want to trump? I'll leave them floating left. I'll set the margin left to 5% instead. I'll leave the float left. Oh. So these two listened to that, but the first child didn't, right? So that I have to still take care of that one. So let's go to the section, main section, first dash child. And what do I need to bump off here? I just need to set the width also, and set. Yeah, the margin left can be 0. That's cool, right? That still makes sense because it's going to be on the left-hand side. But I do need to change the width. That's still winning out right here. So I'll set the margin or the width also 20%. Now all three of them are behaving themselves, sort of. Okay. Except for our second child, nth of type 2, still has a margin 0 on it, our margin left, right? So this needs to change. I can even copy that. And set the margin left back to 5%. So you might want to put some sort of comment in there so that when you come back, you're like, why the heck am I doing that? Right? That's called courteous commenting. So refresh that, and there we go. So from our very small one to our medium, for the slightly larger one there, that's cool. Then we should go to our 2-column layout, and then to the 3-column layout. Now the only issue now with the 3-column layout is I've got a problem now with my line length. That's very difficult. So what I should do is size the text down a little bit so that I can have a reasonable measure inside my columns. So where did I set that up here? Was it in the body? Did I change the font size here? Yeah, it's just the body. So that will be still in play here. So I'll overwrite the body from the 480. I like to put my rules in the same order as my source. And I don't know, maybe you go down to 90%. Try it. Okay, so now that's a bit more reasonable. Okay, so there may be some other instances whereby, well, this makes sense. You know, maybe this is cool here. I don't mind this, but if this thing is at this breakpoint, I'm in a landscape. So if I'm holding and it's a fairly big phone, if I'm holding it this way, maybe I want to give them 3 columns in this situation, even though my width may be not enough to justify that breakpoint. So what I could do is I can add an OR situation. So what we've been doing is here we've been saying, so the media is screen and the min width is 960. I can also put an OR operand in there. So what I can do here, so let's go up to the situation here with the, oh no, yeah, we'll go here. So I might want to do something here. Or for example, where did I put the OR here? No, let's go up to for E, landscape. Yeah, we'll go up to, not this one, but for E. We'll go up to the top for 768. So let's go up to here, 768. So this will be cool. Also, not only this, but also if we want a landscape. So sorry, not the 3-column, but the 2-column layout in landscape for our screen. So what I can do is I can put a comma here like that. And then I can put in another query in here in parentheses and say orientation landscape. You can target portrait or landscape. So in order to do that, we will need the dev tools up and running. So what I can do is what I'll do instead of responsive, I'll choose a phone, let's say a Nexus 5X, for example. So there's our phone. This is pretty cool. Let's go ahead and change the orientation to portrait or landscape default. And now in this situation, sorry?
Because the min width on the query was 768 and that's only 732.
Yes. Or, that's the thing. It doesn't have to be and. I can now put an or. So it can be either this situation, or it could be this situation, or both. So that's the beauty of that. You can say, yeah, it doesn't. In this case, holding it this way may not be wide enough to satisfy this. But I think with a decent phone, maybe it's landscape, we can serve that up anyway. So that's the power of doing the or instead of the and. But yeah, now you can, try the different, like check out, like if I go to the 6P, that's probably more capable. Oh no, it's 732. Wasn't that the same? I guess that was the same, right? In terms of width or height? Yeah. So next is 6P. They don't give me the browser Chrome. I like having the device Chrome in there. That's kind of gives me. Anyway. Sweet. Yep.
See that's the 960.
960.
Yeah.
Here. Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
There. Okay, I'll get rid of that. Where do I want to take it? There's something else I wanted to do that was important. Clearfix. All right, so this now comes a really fun part. The watch. What the heck do I do with a watch? So let's head up to, I captured that. So up at the top here, we started our media queries at 4G, or 4F, sorry. Attempt to set breakpoints for a watch. So fire up this URL here. And this was, wasn't written too long ago, but we've got some interesting things here. So if you snap open wearables, there's two of them, two breakpoints here. So there's the Apple Watch and the Moto 360 watch. I don't know which one is popular, more popular than the other right now. I don't know if I care, but it's interesting. So if we look at the media, we don't even query screen. We just look at the max device. So this one, for the Apple Watch, we set a max width and a min width. So between 38 millimeters and 42 millimeters. But they're using device width, right? So we're actually, because a watch, you're probably not going to get a windowed environment. You certainly not at the time. So they're querying the actual device itself, and they're using millimeters, physical fixed units. In the case of the Moto 360 watch, we're querying the max device width at 218, and the max. Does it mean min? Max device width. Huh. I wonder if that meant it's supposed to be min. That doesn't make any sense. I would think this would be min. Interesting.
No, that makes sense.
It does make sense?
Yeah.
So the max width is that, and the max height. It's height. I'm sorry. It's that. So max height. So anything above this device width and height. So we're talking about a very specific rectangle. So, but like so. So we're talking about the max device height is 281, and the width being 218. Interesting. Now I wonder if for the circular screen that fits in. I wonder if that is contained by that or it kind of covers it. I don't know. So anyway, we'll steal this here, including the comment. And we'll paste it in our code. I'm going to put this on one line, but that's just me. I prefer that. You just whatever your formatting, be consistent. Okay, just whatever way you want to go. So our max. Now we're using device and device. What was interesting is when I was playing with this. On my own machine, so this version of Atom is a little older than the one on my own notebook. The one I have on my notebook, it actually the syntax checking actually complains about device. in here. Yours might too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what they're saying is, be aware. This it looks like this may be deprecated shortly. Right? That's what I'm assuming. So what kind of things might we do with a crazy watch? Well, I don't know. Let's say a watch might be in a situation where it's low light. Maybe we want to reverse the coloring, so have a dark background and light text on top of it, along with maybe boosting the font size. I don't know. So let's go in here and say, okay, if this is the situation, let's set the header, comma, section, comma, footer, and we'll set the background color for all of them to black. We'll set the color for the text, foreground color, to white. And I'll boost the font size up 150% to make it very large, because we've got a small screen. And I mean, it very much depends on the nature of your content and what you expect to show reasonably on that screen. You know, I don't know. Maybe you put a border radius of 50% on if it's a round watch. I don't know. Maybe there's going to be a media query soon for a round screen versus a square screen or a rectangular screen. I don't know. It's insane, right? It's nuts. So, anyway, nothing. But I mean, again, if you are, if you're building out utilities for like web apps, you know, that serve up Moto 360 users, you're going to have to be very well used in how the Moto 360 watch renders the browser page, right? I don't know. But you may be developing native apps for the watch, which is more likely, and those native apps will likely be using CSS, right? It might not be a browser on the phone. It may be a native app, but you're writing display rules, and those may be written in CSS. So you may have a little bit more granularity in terms of control. But we'll see. So now, if I do that, how in the heck, how am I supposed to, here we'll axe this, how am I supposed to check that out? So I don't know.
Go to Mozilla, and Mozilla has Motorola Moto 360.
On Firefox?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe mine doesn't though.
You can actually reduce it on
I don't think my version will.
So,
Yeah. I think I'm at, I'll show you what, I'm at version
try to go.
about Firefox. I am at 50.0.2. What have you got?
I'm gonna find where it is.
If you go into the hamburger menu,
Yeah.
and then you go into the very bottom, there's a little question mark here, and then you go about, I think. Well, I'm just guessing that's on this version.
5, 2.
52?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a, so I don't know.
Hey, it's still 5. Somewhere here.
I've got it working on Chrome.
On Chrome?
Yeah, if you have it at responsive, then you can just set it to the actual.
Inspect. Oh, I guess I got to reload the page, right? So going to responsive,
So you can actually just set it to the.
right? I can crank this down. Yeah, there we go. But what's a good idea maybe is we can actually add this here. We can edit this list and add a custom device. And this is a good idea if you're going to be, oh, come on, open this up, responsive, edit, add custom device. So we'll call this the Moto 360. Is that what I called it? Or is it 360G? G or something like that? What do I call it?
360.
360 watch. So 360 watch. So set the height. What was our height? Is that the height or the width? No, height and width. 281 by 218. Now, I'm not sure what the device pixel ratio is. That for this device, what that means is how many physical pixels are there inside a CSS pixel, because pixel densities vary from piece of hardware to piece of hardware. I don't know. We'll have to look that up. The other thing is the user agent string. So that's what that's what the device would report as what it would report in as in terms of a user agent. What kind of software is it? We can look that up and say, what is a Moto 360 user agent? Moto GWatch user agent string. See if we can pull that up. So again, it depends on what version of Chrome you're running on the Motorola Moto G. So you can grab this. You can say, well, maybe it's Chrome 43. So you copy that user agent string, and you put that in there. Now let's see about the device pixel ratio. Device pixel ratio. Device metrics. Yep.
Should we really consider watches in our production life now?
Probably not.
Okay.
No, probably not. Is this a big deal? No. But it's coming. So if you have some sort of cognizance of where this is going, you'll be surprised at some of the more interesting things you'll end up doing. I remember working. Do you remember the Palm Pilot? I don't know if any of you remember. That was kind of before smartphones were a big deal. Like phones were flip phones at that point, and people texted using number pads. And so this thing came out, and I was involved in a project where they had a browser on the Palm, and this company they gave all of their agents Palm Pilots of a certain, I think it was Palm Pilot 5 or something, I guess, and it had this crazy browser called Blazor 4. It was some kind of weird Mozilla variant, but it was very proprietary, and we had to nail it. Like we had to get their web apps working on Blazor 4.0 on the Palm Pilot 5. I was like, what? And the user agent string was very weird, and the dimensions of the phone were they were like nothing we'd ever seen, and we had to get it. And I was like, I never would have guessed, right? But there we were developing for a mobile device. This is back in 2002, right? I was doing this kind of thing, and I wouldn't have guessed it. So just keep your mind open, because you never know what you might be up against. And wearables, I don't think they're going away. But a lot of times we see something like this, and people are going to say, oh, wearables, everyone's going to have one of these things. I think a lot of times what happens is these things do gain popularity, but sometimes things play out in a way we don't expect. But I think it's important to, but even if you're, if part of your job is to support a web app for a very specific phone platform, I'd like you to be able to put this into your emulation software and at least have that at your fingertips. So what were we looking for? What phone was it? Moto 360? Moto 360, right? So our aspect ratio, what's our pixel ratio? Screen dimensions in centimeters. Aspect ratio. Yes. Width by height in pixel. This is CSS dots per pixels. So this is it, 1.3. So there's 1.3 CSS pixels for every device pixel, DP. You see what I mean? So a CSS pixel on this watch is slightly bigger than the device pixel, the actual point of light that's emitted on the screen. So it's 1.3. So then I'd have to go, this is cool. So then I put in here 1.3. Add that. This is cool. So now if I refresh the page, did I build out my styles? I forget now. Yeah, I built out my styles. So now I go into the list and change the watch. That didn't work. Oh, it sort of worked. That's weird. It doesn't work right away though. think I got the, it's 281 wide by, oh, I know, because I got the width and the height wrong. It should be, I got these backwards. Hang on a sec. I think this should be 218 and 281. 218 is the, I think that was it. There we go. That was it. So it doesn't quite work. You'd have to do something about the size of the. We'd have to bring the font size down a little bit because our headings are gonna blow out. But I don't know. I mean, if that's a, I'm trying to imagine what the physical device size would be. Screen dimensions. Oh, this is in inches. Was it the Moto G or the 360? No, 360. 1.6 by 1.4 inches. I'm trying to imagine that. I don't know. Would that be usable? Would you read that on a phone? I don't know. But maybe the interface is. Maybe it's an app that's hitting a. Maybe you bought a weather station, one of those little portable weather stations that you put outside your kitchen window, right? You connect that to the Wi-Fi in your house, and there's an app, that hits the web server on that little. It's a little Arduino, and all you want on this screen is the temperature and a couple of icons. You know, the wind speed, a few other pieces of information. So that might be helpful. I don't know, but it works. So there you go. Now you know how to add a device. Certainly in this context here for the Google mobile things. And put in the device pixel ratio and the user agent string for that browser. So that is that particular browser, Chrome 43 on a Moto 360, add pixel ratio from device pixels to CSS pixels of 1.3. Are we insane for even considering that? Maybe. but you never know. This stuff is getting bigger and bigger all the time. Cool. So what do I want to get? For F, G. Oh yeah. So I've added the watch. That's cool. That's done. And step 5. So we'll talk about step 5, and then we just got a couple other last little finishing touches. I'll send you ahead on a challenge and walk you through the last project as posted on Blackboard, and I'll set you free for the day. So I've left this here. Don't try and memorize this one. It's really important that we force IE into true standards rendering mode, particularly if we're doing some more advanced things like media queries, right? You need to make sure IE is rendering in edge mode, which is the latest version, right? So is that to say that IE won't behave itself? No, that's not really to say that. Let's go to DOM Explorer. No, put this back. Put it back. Oh, I broke it. Where did I put that? How do I bind this back to the... There we go. Bolt this. I want to put this up on the side. Show console. Unpin. No. Grr. Okay. That's not to say necessarily that IE won't work. We don't put this into, but something's broken here. Oh no, oh red. Okay, no, maybe we're in good shape. Yeah, something's not quite right. Change this to IE 10. 9. Let's see where we can get it to fail. 8. Does 8 still? You see the media queries fail with version 8. And if we get into 7, of course, media queries no go. So first thing is make sure that IE is rendering in standards mode. Okay, that's the first thing to do. And then it's forcing it into edge mode if it's capable of that. Yep. Yeah. As far as I know, yes. Yes.
What does that do?
Chrome equal 1. I think that has something to do with. I forget now. I used to know. Now I forgot. I'll have to look that up. I've forgotten what that. I don't think it has anything to do with Google Chrome. I think it has to do with the browser Chrome on IE. But you know, I'll circle that. I'll find out what that exact string in there is needed for, and if we need it or not, I'll dig that up. But this is what you do want the UI, a user agent, to be forced that to edge on IE. So that's a good question. So step 5, step 6. Where did I put my step 6? Edit, find. Find next after the style sheet. Step 6. Okay, fix IE and older issues with rendering elements with thanks to the HTML5 shiv. So yeah, the problem is, I mean, this is the low-hanging fruit. We've talked about this before. If you've got a really old version of IE, for example, 8 and older, it won't understand what a main or a header is. It won't display them as block, so you can't style them reliably with CSS. So how do I fix that kind of situation? We download the shiv, and we put a conditional comment in here. So here's what the conditional comment looks like. So we do a regular comment like this, 2 dashes, and then we put a couple of brackets, the square ones, and we say if less than IE space 9. So it has to be exactly that. And then I put a right angle bracket. That's the starting of the conditional, and to end it, we do this. I always have to look these up. End if. Close the square brackets, and then we close out that's the delimiter for the HTML comment. You recall that? So then inside here, we'll put in a script, and the source is equal to, and I've already got inside your JS here, I've got html5shiv.js. So js/html5 shiv.js, end of script. So if it's less than IE9, the browser will pull up the HTML5 shiv, and we'll properly use JavaScript to properly render header, main, section, footer, all that stuff. Yep.
How long do you think we will have to worry about all the versions of there? How many years of playing?
I always find myself being overly optimistic about this kind of thing. It was funny. I remember on our advisory committee where we bring in industry people to help us steer the curriculum development for the program, we had some people from one of the big Canadian banks, and we posed to them that very question. They said, "Oh, you can build modern-looking code," and we said, "Well, we see you've got a laptop there with IE6. When can we expect your IT departments to stop provisioning corporate machines without IE6 on them?" And they said, "Oh, you can ignore it now." I'm like, well, what do you mean we can ignore it now? You've got it right now in front of us. So the issue, it's not so much day-to-day users. It's some of those corporate users, what they might do is they have a certain version of, and very often it's IE in a Windows network, and they build other applications that rely on very specific features of a given browser. And those are very hard to move forward because in order for them to modernize the browser that people use in the company, and that's a large number of people, they have to redevelop said app, which might cost them millions of dollars. So that's been the problem. It's not so much the personal users, it's the corporate users that tend to be the ones kind of dragging their feet on this stuff. And it's a cost issue. So I'd like to say you can forget about IE8 and lower forever. Again, it depends on who you're working for, what you're doing. Good question. Yep.
So I looked up that Chrome equals 1.
Yep.
That was basically for Google's Chrome frame,
Okay.
and that was to be used with IE, but apparently it was deprecated back in 2014.
Okay, so we don't have to use it anymore. So yeah, because there was a something. Wasn't it an extent? It was an extension or a.
Yeah,
It was something that allowed you to browse with Chrome inside IE. for corporate. That's where people were frustrated. So maybe. Thanks for looking that up. So what we're saying now is this.
This is really sad.
Well, it's sad, but we can build really forward-looking code with progressive enhancement. We can have all the fancy stuff as long as you build it responsibly. It degrades gracefully in older browsers, and it comes down to we used to care what an older browser looked like, and that would cause us all kind. That was even sadder because now we had to create the same experience in a browser that wasn't capable of it. With progressive enhancement now, what we say is, well, if this browser can't do box shadow, so what? So it doesn't do drop shadow. We don't spend any time trying to dig into proprietary filters and do all kinds of weird stuff to get it to do it. What a waste of time and money. Let's just move forward. Build a good experience. Like give the user an experience that's good, that's appropriate for their browser. And if it's an older browser, they're not going to know what they're missing as long as it's not something that's critically functional. So yeah, I don't think it's sad. I think it's sometimes a little shocking that people have to put up with old technology like that. But
Yeah, but the fact that Internet Explorer had Chrome built into it, to use Chrome inside IE because IE was unable to do what it's supposed to do.
yeah. A day will. I mean, they fixed IE. It's called Edge. It's actually a good browser, right? And the team of people working at Microsoft they're doing some incredible stuff with standards-based open web technology. So they're no longer a laggard, right? The state of things is much better, much better, and it's getting better all the time. But I think we have to stop reverting ourselves to older things like browser sniffing and user agent detection and like kind of archaic things of that. Just look at I like the capability detection approach, like with Modernizer, and say, forget about what it is. What can the thing do? How much screen space do I have? And can it do this feature? If it can do this feature and it has lots of screen space, let's go. Let's do it. I think it's a much simpler approach. So, anyway, I lived through the very darkest days of the web, and I almost gave up on it at certain points because it was so crazy. It's much better now. You guys, you're in a better place than we used to be. I guess thanks because people did persevere and make these kind of, they put in these kind of shims that made it possible to adopt modern web technologies. Okay, so that's cool. Thanks, Ryan. That's cool. I feel better about that. I don't need it, which is always a good thing. So I put the shiv in. No, did we put the shiv in? We put the shiv. So let's see if that works here. So the shiv is then good for less than IE9. So I've got IE7. Let's change this to IE8. I guess I need to refresh the screen. Yeah. So now IE8 now renders those elements as block. Now there's something else going on with the media queries, but at least we're rendering those as blocks. So the other part of so the shiv and the respond. Okay, so the other part is step 7, was it? Find in project. Step 7. 151. Somewhere around about line 151. Where did I put that? Oh, it's right at the bottom. So step 7. If we desperately want to go away. If we desperately want to get responsiveness working, we're stuck working with a browser like IE8, and it doesn't work. We need it to understand media queries. Then we can build. You can use something like a script that will support that. So here's respond.js. You can head over to the GitHub if you want. A great little tool. And in the same vein, we can attach this with a one of these proprietary queries here. Conditionals. If we say less than or equal to IE space 8, angle bracket, and then here we'll end the if, angle bracket, exclamation point. You got to watch this. You got to make sure it's right. End if, close the brackets, close out the HTML comment so everyone else, every other browser ignores this, and then in here we'll bolt a script. The source is equal to, from here, the JS respond.js, end of script. There. So if we're in a situation where maybe we're in a corporate network and a lot of people are stuck on, I hope you're not in that situation, but sometimes that's our job to figure this stuff out. You just do it. Bolt respond.js onto the HTML template. If it's less than an IE, and those media queries should work. I don't know. We'll try simulating the situation here. So I'll save that. Let's see if so we're IE8. So I'll reload the page. And can I get this to work? Not really. I'll close the DevTools. No, I have to leave the DevTools up because I need to render it in IE 9. And let's go to 8. I don't think so. I might have to pull this up over HTTP. So I'll have to upload it to a server. All right. Anyway, in theory, that's how it works. I'll put it on the server and I'll check it with the URL and see what that's. Cool. Very cool. All right. So that's all. We've wrapped that up then for today. What I'd like to do for the bonus in-class exercise, and this is a bonus because we're now at the point where we're past 10 in-class lab content. So now this is a true bonus. So this is lucky for you. You're here today. You showed up. So what I'd like to do is take the code that you have here. I guess we're done. I can stop the screencast.